You're fired! And
Alistair Vance, a man who built a $50 billion empire from nothing, was about to lose it all. His stock was in free fall. His partners were abandoning him. His company was being torn apart from the inside, and he was blaming everyone, except the real enemy. In the pre-dawn darkness of his private garage, his Maybach screeched to a halt, inches from a woman standing in his path. She was in a simple maid's uniform. An enraged Alistair Vance flew from the car, demanding to know who she was, ready to have her fired, screaming that his life's work was on the line. But the woman didn't flinch. She looked him dead in the eye. "My name is Serena Jackson," she said. "I clean your office." She let the words hang in the air before delivering the 1-2 punch that would change everything. "You are about to lose your company," she told him, "but it's not collapsing. It's being pushed by the one man you trust most." Vance was about to dismiss her, to call security, until she held up a simple fountain pen. She clicked the end, revealing a tiny hidden USB drive. "And this," she said, "is the secret that proves it." Welcome to Black Lives Story, where we tell the stories that deserve to be heard. You are not going to want to miss what happens next. If you believe in these stories, help them spread by taking 1 second to like, subscribe, and share this video. It's the best way to support our channel. Now, let's get back to that boardroom.
The numbers on the 80th floor display were not projections. They were an epitaph. In the sterile, sun-drenched boardroom of Vance Global, $28 billion in market cap had evaporated since breakfast. The mood wasn't just panic. It was the icy, silent terror of men who had never been told no, suddenly hearing the universe scream it. Alistair Vance, a man who looked carved from granite and fury, slammed his fist on the mahogany table. The tremor rattled a dozen untouched glasses of sparkling water. "Bleeding," he roared, his voice a gravel pit avalanche. "We are not experiencing a downturn, Gerald. We are bleeding out. The Riyadh Alpha infrastructure deal gone. Vaporized. A $12 billion contract vanished." A pale VP of operations, Gerald flinched. "Alistair, the consortium cited unforeseen regulatory hurdles." "Unforeseen?" Vance spat. "We write the regulations. And what about Progiderm? Our flagship pharmaceutical patent. The one that funds our entire medical division. Invalidated. This morning. How? Who is letting this happen?" The room was a sea of shrinking shoulders and averted eyes. This was a rout. This was the end of an era. And in the center of the storm, one man remained perfectly, unnervingly still. Marcus Thorne, Chief Operating Officer, and the only man in the room not visibly sweating through his $1,000 suit. He was the shadow to Vance's fire, a man whose charm was a scalpel. He let the panic crest, let Vance's rage suck all the oxygen from the room, before he finally spoke. His voice was smooth, reasonable, and utterly devoid of fear. "Alistair," he said, and the room snapped to him, desperate for an anchor. "Rage is a luxury. We need surgery." Vance turned his bloodshot eyes on Thorne. "Then cut, Marcus. Tell me who to cut." "It's a cascading failure," Thorne said, standing and walking to the display. He moved with an athlete's grace, his presence commanding. He tapped the screen, bringing up a complex flowchart of the legal department. "The Riyadh deal was lost because our competitor knew our bid down to the last cent. The Progiderm patent was invalidated because a key procedural filing was misdated by 6 months. This isn't bad luck, Alistair. This is sabotage." A cold whisper ran through the room. "Sabotage? Who?" Vance's voice was now a low, dangerous growl. Thorne let the question hang. He looked at Vance with the practiced sympathy of a surgeon about to deliver bad news. "The common link is our own legal department. Specifically, the International Compliance Division. Headed," he paused as if it pained him, "by Cynthia Rumsfeld." Vance's eyes widened, then narrowed. Cynthia? She's been with me for 20 years. And she's been sloppy for 2, Thorne said, his voice laced with a subtle, cutting disappointment. Alistair, she's been running her own side consultancy, in direct violation of her contract. It's possible her misdating wasn't just sloppy. It might have been purposeful. A gesture to a new employer, perhaps the very competitor who stole the Riyadh deal. It was a brilliant, venomous performance. Thorne offered a name, a motive, and a solution all in one. He had channeled Vance's paranoia, which had been a wild, burning fire, into a single, focused blowtorch. Get her, Vance snarled, jabbing a finger at the door. Get security. Get her out of my building. Now. And lock her out of everything. Everything. He turned to the rest of the board. The rest of you, find the money. Stop the bleeding. Or I'll find men who will. The meeting dissolved. Executives scattered, shouting into phones, their faces ashen. Alistair Vance, left alone, slumped in his chair, a wounded lion. Marcus Thorne remained, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. We'll get through this, Alistair. I'll handle Cynthia. I'll start the damage control. We'll find the traitors. Find them all, Marcus, Vance whispered, suddenly looking his age. Find every last one. I will, Thorne said, his eyes cold and empty as the view from the 80th floor. I promise. 12 hours later, the boardroom was a tomb. The panic of the day had been wiped clean, the mahogany polished to a mirror, the glasses collected, the screens dark. The 80th floor was silent, save for the whisper of an industrial vacuum and the soft, rubbery hiss of cartwheels on marble. This was Serena Jackson's world. By day, Vance Global was a citadel of power and noise. By night, it was her dominion of stillness and shadow. Serena was a ghost in the machine, a woman in a powder blue smock who moved with a methodical grace that rendered her invisible. She was the one who saw the lipstick stains on coffee cups, the half-eaten celebratory pastries in the trash, the crumpled drafts of angry resignation letters. She was the building's confessor, and she knew its secrets. Tonight, the penthouse office felt different. It felt wrong. Alistair Vance was a man of chaotic, explosive routine. His trash bin was always a volcano of paper, of reports, of crushed protein bar wrappers. Tonight, it was empty. Spotless. A man on the brink of ruin, a man she'd heard bellowing from down the hall at 7 p.m., had apparently tidied up. She frowned, the scent of her lemon oil polish mixing with something else. A faint, unfamiliar smell. Almost like a sweet cigar, but sharper. Serena was not just a maid. That was the story she wore, the smock she put on. The woman inside the smock, the one who had once been a senior forensic auditor for a firm that had been crushed by a competitor named Vance Global. That woman was still alive. And that woman was an observer of patterns. All of it was a break in the pattern. She ran her vacuum under the massive, dark wood desk. The desk of a king. She nudged his Italian leather chair back, and her hand froze. On the floor, near the chair's base, was a scuff mark. Not a roll mark, but a drag mark. As if the chair had been pulled out and held in place by someone sitting in it, their feet braced against the floor in tension. She moved the vacuum, her eyes scanning the deep carpet. And she saw it. Tucked just under the lip of the desk's modesty panel, gleaming a dull, platinum silver, was a pen. A very, very expensive-looking fountain pen. She'd seen them before, in their velvet boxes on signing days. This wasn't her job. Her job was trash and floors. But a $2,000 pen left on the carpet, that was an anomaly. She bent and retrieved it. It was heavy, cold, and flawless. A Mont Blanc, engraved not with Vance's initials, but with a single stylized T. T for Thorne. She almost smiled. The man was so smooth, he probably shed expensive accessories. She held it, ready to place it in the center of Vance's desk blotter, a silent testament to his COO's carelessness. And then idly, her fingers just did. She clicked the top. It wasn't the click of a ballpoint. It was a solid mechanical thunk. The pen didn't open. The back of it did. The entire platinum-plated clip cap pulled away, not with a nib attached, but with a small black and silver rectangle of high-density plastic. A USB drive. A tiny, high-resolution, data-heavy, encrypted as hell USB drive. A cold alarm, a feeling she hadn't felt in 6 years, jolted through her. It was the old, familiar tingle of a lockpick in a trained hand. The click of a safe's final tumbler falling into place. This was not a pen. This was a secret. Her training, her job, her survival screamed at her. Put it on the desk. Wipe it clean. Forget you saw it. Walk away. This was not her fight. This was a war between gods, and she was just the mortal sweeping up the ashes. But her other self, the auditor, the woman of patterns, the woman who had just smelled a break in the routine and now held the physical evidence of it, that woman was in control. She looked at the empty trash can. She smelled the ghost of the unknown cigar. She saw the scuff mark from the tense, braced chair. This wasn't carelessness. This was a component, a piece of a puzzle. Driven by a gut-wrenching, undeniable feeling of wrongness, Serena Jackson's hand did the one thing it was never supposed to do. It moved from the desk, past the blotter, and slid the pen, the secret, the tea, deep into the pocket of her smock. The transgression was electric, a silent thunderclap in the 80th floor tomb. She had stopped being a ghost. She had just become a player. The next morning, the 80th floor was a morgue. The air, usually electric with the hum of a billion-dollar machine, was thick and sour with fear. Serena, pushing her cart, felt the change in barometric pressure. People were speaking in whispers, avoiding eye contact, clearing their desks not for the cleaners, but for themselves. The purge had begun. The first casualty was the one Thorne had named. Serena was buffing the lobby's black marble floor when the main elevator chimed. It wasn't an executive chime. It was the slow, freight-like descent of the security override. The doors opened. Cynthia Rumsfeld, the head of legal, was a woman Serena knew by her kindness. She always said, "Good evening, Serena," not "good evening." A small but crucial distinction. She was the one who'd organized the Cleaners Staff Appreciation Fund every Christmas. Now, that same woman was being flanked by 2 broad-shouldered security guards in plain suits. Her face was a ruin of shattered glass, pale, streaked with tears, and utterly, terrifyingly vacant with shock. She wasn't carrying a briefcase. She was carrying a single, flimsy cardboard banker's box, the universal symbol of corporate execution. Serena instinctively backed her cart into an alcove, making herself invisible. This was a shaming. This was a public execution to terrify the survivors. As Cynthia passed, a single item, a silver-framed photo of her children, tumbled from the box. She didn't have a free hand to pick it up. She didn't even seem to notice. One of the guards kicked it, with cold indifference, out of the walkway. Serena watched until the glass doors hissed shut behind her. The pen in her smock pocket, nestled against her hip, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. It was no longer a curiosity. It was a weapon. The same weapon that had just destroyed a 20-year career and a good woman in a single morning. This, she realized with a sickening lurch, was the surgery Marcus Thorne had promised. That night, Serena didn't go home to sleep. She went home to work. Her apartment was small, meticulously neat, a stark contrast to the opulence she cleaned. In her bedroom, past the simple quilt and a single, thriving orchid, was her real self. A heavy, obsolete-looking laptop sat on a simple desk. It was a Frankenputer, cobbled together from parts, with no webcam, no microphone, and most importantly, no Wi-Fi card. It was a digital island, a fortress. It was the only part of her old life she had permitted herself to keep. She sat, her hands, calloused from mops and chemicals, suddenly reclaiming their old, delicate precision on the keyboard. She booted not into Windows, but into a stark, text-based Linux interface. She plugged in the pen. The drive mounted, and it was exactly what she'd expected. A wall, a sheer digital cliff face. The partition wasn't just encrypted, it was nested. A file system hidden inside another, like a Russian doll of secrets. "Amateur," she whispered, a ghost of her former self, the auditor, flickering in her eyes. "An amateur thinks one lock is enough." A professional knows that a visible lock is just a distraction. She let the drive's primary, encrypted partition sit. That was the bait. She instead ran a raw data dump command, scanning the drive block by block for the telltale signature of a hidden volume. And there it was, 128 gigabytes of shadow. She ran her old software, a custom-built brute force dictionary attacker she'd written years ago. It was slow. It was old. But it was hers. She fed it her standard dictionaries. Financial terms, legal jargon, common passwords. The laptop's fan, long dormant, whirred to life, a small, protesting sigh in the quiet apartment. The screen showed a crawl of failures. Hours passed. The sun began to stain the horizon. Nothing. The lock, crafted by Thorne, was holding. She was locked out. The next night at Vance Global, the tension was a drawn wire. She was cleaning the main boardroom, the scene of the original crime. She was exhausted, her mind still churning through decryption keys, when she heard the door open. She didn't look up. She didn't pause her polishing. She simply dissolved. She became part of the furniture, a blue-smocked utility. The air changed. The light, sharp scent of Thorne's cologne hit her seconds before his voice. He was on his phone, his feet up on the mahogany table. He didn't even check to see if the room was empty. Why would he? In his world, it was... And the voice. It wasn't the smooth, empathetic surgeon she'd heard with Vance. This voice was liquid gold, lazy, and dripping with contempt. Oh, absolutely, he bought it, Thorne laughed, a low, rich sound. Swallowed the whole Cynthia narrative. Hook, line, and sinker. Serena's hand, wiping the table's edge, was now only 10 feet from him. She kept wiping. Steady, rhythmic circles. He's blaming everyone but me, Thorne continued. It's almost sad. The old lion has lost his teeth. He's so busy hunting for rats, he doesn't see the python in the room. Serena's heart was a cold, hard knot. Her blood felt like ice. No, the timeline is perfect, Thorne said, his voice dropping slightly. I've triggered the final compliance failure. The bonds will be downgraded by Friday. By Monday, he'll be in breach of his loan covenants. He'll be desperate. There was a pause. That's when you come in. The Phoenix Fund is ready to buy the scraps for pennies on the dollar, and he'll thank us for doing it. Phoenix Fund. The name echoed in the vast, empty room. It hung in the air like a trace of poison. Phoenix Fund. Serena finished the table. She backed out of the room, pushing her cart, her movements slow, silent, and deliberate. Thorne never even looked at her. She didn't go home. She went to the staff locker room, took her break, and sat in the humming silence. Phoenix Fund. It wasn't just a name. It was a key. She returned to her apartment at 4 a.m., her mind a razor. She sat at the laptop, the fan still whirring, the attack script still failing. She stopped the program. She opened her custom dictionary file. She added a new list of words. Phoenix Fund, the Phoenix Fund, Old Lion, Thorne, Marcus Thorne, Python scraps. She reinitiated the attack, aiming this new, focused dictionary at the hidden partition. Then she watched. The failures scrolled. Phoenix. Fail. Thorne. Fail. The script was running through permutations. Phoenix 01. Fail. Phoenix 2025. Fail. Old Lion. Fail. And then, key underscore attempt. Old Lion has lost his teeth. Key underscore accepted. Decrypting volume. Mounting /dev/sdb2to/mnt/shadow. Success. Serena stopped breathing. The screen flashed, and the directory structure unfolded. It wasn't just a few files. It was everything. A perfect, nightmarish mirror of Vance's entire server. But this mirror was cracked. She opened a folder labeled legal. And there it was. proudgderm_filing_vfinal.pdf. She opened it. A clean, valid patent filing. And right next to it, proudgderm_filing_vfinal_submitted.pdf. She opened the second file. It was a forgery. A perfect, subtle, single-digit change. A filing date misdated by 6 months. The exact file that had been sent to the patent office. Her hands were shaking. She moved to finance. She saw the Riyadh Alpha bid pristine. And in a subfolder labeled Firewall Comms, she saw a log. A single, encrypted data packet sent to an external IP address, timestamped 2 days before the bid was lost. It was Thorne. And then she saw the Phoenix folder. It wasn't a complex ledger. It was a simple spreadsheet, but it was the most damning thing she'd ever seen. It was a trail of payments. Small, untraceable wire transfers, routed through 3 shell corporations, all culminating in a single account. The recipient? Phoenix Fund. It wasn't just theft. It wasn't just sabotage. It was a plan. A meticulous, systematic, years-long campaign to bleed Vance Global dry, to doctor its books, to sabotage its deals, all to crash the stock and allow Thorne, the python, to swallow his own company for pennies on the dollar. Serena leaned back, the blood draining from her face. The pen in her pocket was not a weapon. It was the blueprint for a murder. And Alistair Vance wasn't just the victim. He was the man who had personally, on Thorne's advice, handed the killer the gun. And she, Serena Jackson, the invisible maid, was the only person in the world who knew. The clock was no longer an abstract pressure. It was a physical, bludgeoning force. Serena learned about the 9 a.m. meeting by accident, in the way she learned all things, by being invisible. She was restocking the executive lounge, a room still littered with the debris of a dozen panicked all-night sessions. A junior VP, his face the color of old parchment, was on the phone, his voice a low, frantic buzz. "Yes, I have the signature packets," he was whispering. "The 9 a.m. arrival. Alpha Strategic Holdings. I know, but Mr. Thorne says they're the only ones with the liquidity to stop the bleeding. He says Mr. Vance has already approved. It's a restructuring. A lifeline." Serena's blood ran cold. Alpha Strategic Holdings. A name so bland, so neutral, it could only be a shell. It could only be the neutral third party Thorne was sending in. It was the public face of the Phoenix Fund. The 9 a.m. meeting wasn't a restructuring. It was a public execution. It was the moment Thorne would hand Vance the pen to sign away his own empire. She had less than 5 hours. She couldn't call. She couldn't email. Any digital message would be intercepted by Thorne's network. She couldn't go to security, they reported to Thorne. She couldn't walk into the penthouse. Thorne's assistant would have her thrown out. There was only one way. She had to breach the inner sanctum, a place no cleaner was ever allowed at this hour. The private garage. She took the service elevator down to P4, the subterranean level reserved for Vance himself. The air was cold, still, and smelled of ozone and curing concrete. She was a ghost in her blue smock, a trespasser. Every camera, I felt like a hot poker on her back. She found a utility alcove, a dark notch in the concrete wall behind a massive pillar, and she waited. The minutes stretched into an hour. The cold seeped through her thin uniform. Her heart was a frantic bird against her ribs. This was it. Fired was the best-case scenario. Arrested was more likely. At 5:32 a.m., the heavy metal gates groaned open. A beam of pure, white light sliced through the darkness as the Maybach, a black hole on wheels, swept in. It didn't drive, it glided, a silent billion-dollar shark. It came to a stop in the reserved spot, and the engine cut out, plunging the garage back into near silence. This was her moment, the point of no return. Before the driver could get out, before Vance's own door could open, Serena stepped out from the shadows. She stood directly in front of the car, illuminated in the headlights, a small, blue, utterly out-of-place apparition. The driver's door flew open. "Hey, you, get away from the car." But it was Vance's door that opened with the most violence. Alistair Vance, his suit rumpled, his face a mask of sleepless rage, uncoiled from the back seat. He looked smaller, and infinitely more dangerous. "What the hell is this?" he snarled, his voice echoing off the concrete. He wasn't just angry, he was apocalyptic. This breach of security by her was the final, humiliating straw. "I am on the brink of ruin, and I have to deal with you? You're fired. Get her out of here, Tom. Get her arrested." The driver, Tom, started toward her. Serena held up a hand, not to him, but to Vance. Her body was shaking, a tremor she couldn't control, but her voice was a steel rod. "Mr. Vance, she said, her voice cutting through the garage. "You're about to give your company to the man who is destroying it." Vance laughed, a short, barking, joyless sound. "Is that right? Who sent you? A competitor? Who's paying you for this stunt?" He was already reaching for his phone to call building security himself. "His name is Marcus Thorne," Serena said. Vance froze, his hand halfway to his pocket. "You're insane. Marcus is the only one keeping this ship from sinking. His fund is called Phoenix," Serena pushed on, her words like bullets. "The restructuring deal at 9 a.m. The Alpha Strategic Holdings. It's him. It's his shell. He's not saving you. He's buying you for scraps." Vance's face contorted, a mask of pure disbelief and rage. He took a step toward her, his finger jabbing the air. "You're done. You're finished. I'll have you in a cell." He told his partners, "You're an old lion who's lost his teeth." The words hit the air and hung, stopping Vance dead. It was as if she'd slapped him. The blood drained from his face, replaced by a ghastly gray pallor. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't a guess. It was a specific, private, metaphorical insult. It was Thorne's voice. What did you just say?" Vance whispered. "He said he's the python in the room," Serena continued, relentless. "He said you're so busy hunting rats, you don't see him. He's been sabotaging you for years. The Riyadh deal. The Proudgyderm patent. He's been forging the documents himself." Vance just stared at her, his mind visibly reeling, trying to reconcile the impossible. How do you?" Serena reached into her smock pocket and pulled out the platinum pen. She held it out. "He dropped this in your office. The T is for Thorne." Vance looked at the pen, then at her. He didn't take it. "The proof is on this," Serena said. "A hidden USB drive. But we don't have time. The 9 a.m. meeting. He's coming here to sign the papers that will give him your company. You have to see the proof. You have to check the ledgers. Right now." There was a terrible, stretched silence. Vance looked at his driver. "Tom, stay here." Not a word. He turned and stalked to the elevator, not looking back. "Come on." The penthouse office was dark, the monitors casting a ghostly blue light. Vance stormed to his desk and slammed his hand on the terminal. "All right, I'm calling your bluff. Give me the pen." She gave it to him. He jammed it into a USB port. A drive labeled M. Thorne popped up. He clicked it. It asked for a password. "It's encrypted," he growled. "A locked drive. This proves nothing." "That's the decoy," Serena said, stepping into the light of the monitors. She moved around the desk, her reflection appearing next to his on the dark screen. "The real drive is hidden." Vance looked at her, his fury warring with a new, terrifying curiosity. "What are you? Some kind of spook?" "I'm your maid, Mr. Vance. And I used to be a forensic auditor." She didn't wait for permission. She pushed his hand off the mouse. "With respect, sir, you don't know what to look for. You're looking for an open door. This is a hidden panel." For the next 30 minutes, the maid in the blue smock dictated, and the billionaire, the titan of industry, obeyed. "Open your terminal." "No, not the desktop," the command line. "Type this." "Now mount the physical drive." "No, that's the logical volume. You need to call the raw." "Okay, just let me." Her hands, calloused and chapped, flew across his keyboard. Lines of code scrolled past. Vance watched, his face a stone, as she entered the password. "Old lion has lost his teeth." The hidden partition mounted. "There," she said, her voice a whisper. Vance seized the mouse. He didn't need her help anymore. He knew his own server. He clicked. He saw the legal folder. He saw the 2 Proudgyderm files side by side. The original. The forgery. He opened the finance folder. He saw the firewall comms log. He saw the Riyadh bid, packet stamped and sent to an external IP. And finally, he opened the Phoenix folder. He saw the spreadsheet. The wire transfers. The shell corporations. The dates. The amounts. A 3-year, meticulous, systematic campaign of sabotage, all leading to a single offshore account. Phoenix Fund. Alistair Vance made a sound. It was not a word. It was a low, animalistic noise, a sound of profound, agonizing, and murderous betrayal. He didn't just see the theft. He saw the face of the man who had put a reassuring hand on his shoulder and called him a friend while he'd been sharpening the knife. The color drained from his face, leaving it a waxy, terrifying gray. The lion had finally, truly seen the python, and the meeting was in 3 hours. The boardroom at 8:59 a.m. was a mausoleum. The surviving members of the board sat like stone statues, their faces gray, waiting for their own funeral. Alistair Vance sat at the side of the table, not at its head, a king in exile. He was pale, silent, and appeared, for all intents and purposes, to be a broken man. At 9:01 a.m., the doors opened. Marcus Thorne entered, not alone, but flanked by 2 men in suits so sharp they could cut glass. These were the neutral third party, the men from Alpha Strategic Holdings. They carried identical leather briefcases. They were Thorne's closing attorneys. Thorne was not a conqueror. He was, in his own mind, a savior. He was magnanimous, his face a mask of pained, professional sympathy. He took his place at the head of the table, a seat he was now claiming as his own. "Friends. Alistair," he began, his voice a smooth, deep balm. "This is a difficult day for all of us. No one wanted this. But this is a lifeline." He gestured to his partners. "Alpha Strategic has the liquidity and the vision to see Vance Global through this crisis. To rebuild." He slid a thick stack of documents, bound in blue, down the polished mahogany. They stopped perfectly in front of Alistair Vance. The room held its breath. This was it. The abdication. "Alistair," Thorne said, his voice softening, "it's time to sign." The only sound was the building's ventilation. Vance stared at the documents. He did not move. He didn't pick up the pen. He just stared. A minute passed. Thorne's practiced smile twitched. "Alistair?" Thorne prompted, a hint of steel under the velvet. "We are on a timeline." Vance slowly, deliberately lifted his head. The broken, defeated mask was gone. His eyes, which had been hollow, were now a polar cold. When he spoke, his voice was not the roar of the wounded lion. It was a steel whisper that cut through the entire room. "Marcus," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "I have a question. Just one. Before I sign." Thorne, exasperated, leaned back. "Of course, Alistair. Anything." Vance leaned forward. "The Phoenix Fund. What's the daily withdrawal limit?" The name, spoken aloud in this sterile room, landed like a brick. The board members looked at each other, confused. "Phoenix Fund?" Thorne's smile didn't just vanish. It was annihilated. A tiny electrical flicker in his eye, pure, unadulterated panic, was the only sign. He was a professional, and he scrambled to recover. "Alistair, you're not well," Thorne said, trying to sound concerned. "You're rambling. We're here to discuss Alpha Strategic." "Are we?" Vance said. "Or are we here to discuss the old lion who's lost his teeth?" Thorne's blood ran cold. He went white. That specific phrase. It was impossible. He half rose from his chair. "What is this? What have you done?" "Me." Vance laughed, a cold, harsh sound. "I'm just an old lion. I'm not a details man. I should let an expert handle this." He looked past Thorne at the main boardroom doors. "But before you answer my question, Marcus, I'd like you to meet my new head of internal audits." As if on cue, the double doors at the end of the boardroom swung open. It was not a man in a suit. It was not a faceless VP. It was Serena Jackson. But it was not the Serena that Thorne knew. The blue smock was gone, replaced by a charcoal gray suit that looked less like it was sewn and more like it was forged. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, professional bun. Her face was set, not with fear or anger, but with the cold, unfeeling precision of an executioner. She was no longer a ghost. She was an avenger, and she was carrying a laptop. Thorne stared. His mind, so brilliant at deception, simply could not process the data. "The maid. The maid? You," he breathed. It was the only word he could get out. Serena didn't look at him. She didn't look at anyone. She walked past the stunned board, past the Alpha Strategic partners who were now frozen in their seats, and went directly to the head of the table. She unplugged Thorne's presentation monitor and plugged in her own laptop. For 3 years, Alastair Vance's voice boomed, filling the room as he stood. Mr. Thorne has been sabotaging this company. He has been running a shadow fund, bleeding us dry, all to trigger this very meeting. Serena's screen flashed to life, projected for the entire room to see. Click. He started with small, untraceable data leaks, Vance narrated. The screen showed the firewall comms log. The Riyadh bid. Click. Then he got bolder. He forged legal documents, Vance said. The screen showed the 2 Proud-G-Derm patent filings side by side. The original and the forgery. A gasp went through the room. Click. All to funnel money, Vance's voice dropped, into his own private hostile takeover fund. The Phoenix Fund. The spreadsheet filled the screen. The wire transfers. The shell corporations. The dates. The untraceable payments, all flowing into one account. An account linked directly, through 3 holding companies, to Alpha Strategic Holdings. It was a digital confession. It was the entire plan, exposed in the cold, hard light of the 80th floor. The room was in pandemonium. Board members were shouting. The 2 Alpha Strategic men were already on their feet, grabbing their briefcases. But Thorne just sat there, staring at the screen, at the password "Old Lion has lost his teeth" still visible in the file's metadata. He was unmasked. The performance was over. The charm, the intellect, the charisma, it all evaporated, leaving behind the small, greedy, cornered animal. And then he lunged. He didn't lunge for the door. He lunged for Serena's laptop, a desperate, animalistic attempt to silence the evidence. He didn't make it 2 steps. The main boardroom doors burst open again, but it wasn't board members. It was Tom, Vance's driver, and another man just as large in a perfectly pressed suit. Vance's private security, who had been waiting in the hall for the signal. Tom caught Thorne mid-lunge, his arm clamping around Thorne's chest like a band of steel, lifting him off his feet. "Let me go!" Thorne shrieked, his voice no longer smooth, but a high-pitched, desperate squeal. He was just a common thief. "Mr. Thorne," Vance said, walking over. He calmly picked up the blue-bound restructuring documents. He didn't look at Thorne. He looked at the Alpha Strategic partners, who were frozen by the door. "Your services will not be required." As Tom and the other guard dragged the struggling, cursing Thorne from the room, the Python's last, hateful glare was not for Vance. It was for Serena, the invisible woman, the maid who had brought down an empire of deceit, all because they had never, ever thought to look at her. The fallout was nuclear. The arrest of Marcus Thorne didn't just send a shockwave through Vance Global. It detonated in the wider financial world. The name Phoenix Fund became a curse, and Alpha Strategic Holdings evaporated overnight, its partners and their briefcases, disappearing into the legal ether, pursued by federal indictments. Vance Global was saved, but it was a brutal, battered save. The company was wounded, its stock crippled, its reputation for invincibility shattered. But Alastair Vance, the Old Lion, was not one to let a wound fester. He did not hide. He attacked. 3 days later, he held a press conference. The room was a feeding frenzy of cameras and microphones, a sea of journalists who smelled blood in the water. They expected a humbled CEO. They expected apologies, excuses, and resignations. They got Alastair Vance. He stepped to the podium, not as a victim, but as a man remade by fire. He was calm, cold, and in absolute control. "Vance Global. I was betrayed," he began, the admission silencing the room. "By a man I trusted as a son. A traitorous executive who spent years plotting our demise for his own gain. His name was Marcus Thorne. He has been arrested. His conspiracy has been dismantled. His stolen assets are being seized." He paused, letting the weight of the admission settle. He confirmed their worst fears, and in doing so, he took away their power. "But the story is not what we lost," Vance continued, his voice rising, gaining that old ironclad authority. "It's how we were saved. We have weaknesses. We had a rot, and I was blind to it. And as we rebuild, we are doing so with a complete overhaul of our internal security. A new system, a new protocol, and new leadership. A hand shot up from the front row. A well-known, cynical reporter from the Wall Street Journal. "Mr. Vance, who found this? Was it the SEC? The FBI? Who finally caught a traitor that your entire board missed?" Vance, for the first time, almost smiled. He turned to his side, to the one person who had been standing, silent and unintroduced, just out of the spotlight. "No," Vance said, his voice carrying a new, unfamiliar note of respect. "The FBI and the SEC, they were the ones who were too late. The threat was identified, isolated, and neutralized by one person." He gestured for Serena Jackson to step forward. She moved to his side, not in a suit this time, but in an impeccably tailored dark dress that was both professional and formidable. She did not look at the cameras. She looked straight ahead, her face a mask of calm competence. "This," Alistair Vance announced, his voice booming with the pride of a man who has discovered a new secret weapon, "is Ms. Serena Jackson. Until last week, her name was not on any of our letterheads. But as of today, she is our new chief risk officer." A confused, electric murmur went through the press. "Jackson? Who?" The Journal reporter, baffled, pressed on. "Chief risk officer? What was her background? Was she a white hat hacker you brought in? A private consultant?" Vance's smile finally bloomed. It was a cold, sharp, and deeply satisfied expression. "Ms. Jackson," Vance said, "was the sharpest financial mind I have ever met. She was the only one who saw the patterns no one else did. The only one with the skill to uncover the truth and the courage to bring it directly to me. She was right here, under my own roof all along." He did not say Maid. He didn't have to. The vindication was absolute. He had taken the one person Thorne had deemed invisible, a non-entity, and placed her at the very center of his new empire. The press, for the first time in memory, was speechless. Weeks later, the 80th floor penthouse office was unrecognizable. The dark, heavy mahogany desk was gone, replaced by a sleek, modern workstation of glass and steel. The room was brighter. It was cleaner. But it wasn't the superficial clean of a custodial crew. It was the deep, structural clean of a place that has been purged of its rot. The door opened, and Serena Jackson entered. She did not knock. She was not there to clean. She was there for her 8 a.m. She carried a slim, encrypted tablet. Alistair Vance was already there, nursing a simple black coffee, his sleeves rolled up. He looked better, sharper. "Good morning, Ms. Jackson," he said. It was not a pleasantry. It was a commencement. "Mr. Vance," she replied, her voice crisp. She didn't sit, but moved to the main display, mirroring her tablet. A complex organizational chart of the European division appeared. "I've completed my initial audit of the European division. The Phoenix system, as we're calling it, is more widespread than we thought." "How bad?" Vance asked, his face hardening. "Potentially? Very." Serena's finger tapped the screen, and 3 portraits lit up in red. 3 powerful, well-respected executives. Thorne wasn't a lone python. He was just the first one we found. He left a nest. These 3, they've been running a similar, smaller-scale scorched earth policy, suppressing profits in their own divisions to devalue the stock, likely preparing for their own buyout. She brought up a second screen. "A ledger. We have 3 more Marcuses we need to deal with." The old Alistair Vance would have roared. He would have slammed his fist, demanded heads, and started firing. The new Vance just looked at Serena, a deep, appraising respect in his eyes. He had found his equal. Not in volume, but in precision. He gave a single, sharp nod. "Lead the way, Ms. Jackson." Serena tapped her tablet, and the takedown plan unfolded on the screen. She was no longer looking at her boss. She was briefing her partner. And together they got to work.